This one checklist is everything you need to win at Airbnb in 2025. So you and I both know we're buying Airbnbs for the cash flow and the tax benefits. Now, what's super important to clarify is there are two ways to win. Everything you do prior to going under contract on a home, and then everything you do in terms of managing and generating cash flow after you go live. And most people who are buying their first short-term rental on their own get a lot wrong in both sides of the equation. Number one, when they're going under contract on the home, they're overpaying on the down payment, they're overfunding their closing costs. They're paying way too much in loan origination fees, lender fees, and things like agent commissions on the deal. And then on the other side of the equation, after you go live on the property, I see so many people who do the wrong designs, they index for the wrong things with their listing, and they end up wasting tens of thousands of dollars, wasting money on furniture and amenities that aren't going to convert into more cash flow. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the process we've followed for over 300 clients, closing on over 300 homes over the last 5 years to max out the cash flow and the tax benefits, and specifically win on everything we do on the deal before we actually go under contract. So shaving down the down payment, closing costs, reducing the agent commissions, reducing or entirely removing all the monies that we pay to lenders, and then everything that we do once we've actually closed on the property and we're about to go live so that we can max out the cash flow. So check it out. Okay, here's how to win the Airbnb game in 2025. And you're going to do this on two metrics. Number one, everything that happens prior to closing. So things like reducing the down payment, things like reducing closing costs, things like reducing or getting rid of entirely lender fees, things like reducing or getting rid of agent commissions, especially if a deal has been on market for a while. If the seller is able to compliantly break their relationship with their listing agent, we can just get rid of the agents altogether and cut out the middleman. And then finally, things like monthly payments. So this is really going to be a product of doing something called creative financing, where we're looking to do either seller financing directly with the seller or subject to non-qualified loan assumption with the seller, which means we basically get one of two routes to reduce the total monthly payments as a product of reducing the interest rate, which I'll explain in another video. And then as far as winning in Airbnb, everything after the close has to do with cash flow. So things like improving the design, and that's namely going to be a product of doing things like accent walls, things like adding in unique amenities, so things that are actually revenue drivers for increasing cash flow in the area. So things like using a proven co-host team. So you would be amazed how many properties we buy every single year where it's in a great market, it's the right property type that actually cash flows in that area. But the problem is the current owner, the reason they're selling the home is they just don't have time to manage the property, and they typically don't trust other people to do things for them. Or they already have somebody who's a property manager or a co-host managing the property, but they're not a professional. Think somebody like a cousin or a family member or a close friend, somebody who just has no skill set when it comes to actually maximizing the cash flow on Airbnb properties. So I'm going to go through what to do with each of these one by one, but first I want to start with Barry's transformation. So Barry came to us just over a couple years ago. He ended up buying 2 properties in his very first year with us, and now he's actively working on doing more. So one of the things that he really started with was the cash flow issue. So Barry was a combination of very high income earner, wanting to shield against his tax bill, and then also wanted to do things like actually get cash flow. So one of the things that was really, really cool is he had a great cash on cash return because he ended up buying almost $2 million worth of property that year. Actually, it was just over 2.2 million in real estate that year. So what's crazy is if he would have done these deals on his own, each one of those properties, roughly $1 million each in purchase price, he would have probably needed to put down at least $220,000 down, or roughly 20% down on each home. And he would have had insane closing costs. He would have had to pay anywhere from $15,000 to $45,000 on each deal directly to a lender, which gets us to the very first item that I want you guys to focus on when it comes to doing deals this year. You guys do not need to do the old way, and I'm going to draw this out really quickly so that you can get clear on the old traditional way, which is how you would probably do the stuff on your own, versus the new way. So the old way of doing real estate typically looks something like this, where people are basically overfunding their down payment. For example, if you want to close on a $600,000 home, well, you would need $120,000 cash to close. And then if you factor in the rough approximate closing costs on a home like that, you're talking at least $18,000 to $36,000 in closing costs. So we're already looking at $140,000 to $150,000 all in, which also typically includes those crazy lender fees, You may want to do what's called a rate buy down. So if you want to shave the rate down from pretty much 7% to maybe 6, maybe 6.5% right now, those fees would get even higher. And what I'm not even factoring in here is the seller also needs to pay agent fees. So there's very, very little wiggle room that we can do with the seller in terms of getting a larger seller credit back or reducing the down payment or even coming down on purchase price. So the new way to do this in an absolutely legal, compliant way to structure your transactions where you can literally save anywhere from $60,000 to $180,000 plus doing your deals is you can shift to the new way, which basically means you're doing closer to 6 to 15% down payments. You're doing closer to 1.5% to 3% closing costs, which is typically just a product of if you're going to need to make a monthly payment on the existing mortgage in advance. Are there property taxes? Is there an insurance policy that you need to bind and pay for up front? All these items go into closing costs for creative deals. And then typically saving a massive amount on your closing costs because you're not necessarily using a brand new lender. You're typically taking over the existing loan from the seller, so the property is deeded over to you. You own that property in your name, but instead of you going out and financing a new loan, you're just literally using the existing mortgage that's in place. So now you're responsible for making payments on the seller's existing debt, which is typically at a significantly lower interest rate, especially for homes that we are buying from sellers who bought their home in 21 and 2022 when the interest rates were crazy, crazy low. This is going to be one of the biggest drivers for dropping the closing costs. So for example, on average, we're saving people anywhere from $18,000 to $45,000 plus just on their closing costs alone by removing this one middleman or middle person that we would otherwise need to fund on the transaction, who's a lender, a loan officer, a mortgage company, the bank, who requires a fee for their service of producing and securing a loan product for you. And what that also means is you're not having to do these crazy thing called rate buy down. So if you're trying to get a lower interest rate and then lower monthly payments on the home, you do not need to go and pay a lender an additional $18,000 or more just to shave off interest. You're not even getting a significantly lower interest rate. You're still paying a lot in interest. And the problem with that approach is sometimes these approaches don't even pay for themselves, which is why I typically tell clients, even if we are going to do a conventional deal, I would rather see you fund $10,000 to $20,000 towards enhancements to the property, replacing furniture, adding in unique amenities, rather than just paying a middleman like a lender just to reduce interest rates. So if you go this route, the new way, which includes creative finance, you can basically zero out the entire loan origination fee and any rate buy downs that you would otherwise need to pay. And then the final way to win, and this one is pretty unique, if we already have a seller who's doing what's called a FSBO or a first sale by owner, then they're not paying any agent commission fees, which is amazing because the seller saves a lot of money on the deal. The buyer doesn't have a buyer's agent who's going to represent them, and then the seller doesn't need to pay commission for both agents. And what this does is it allows the seller to take more proceeds, which allows them to then be more flexible on terms with the buyer. Now, what's also really cool about this approach is sometimes we find listings that are about to expire, and there's a compliant way, since we're not agents, that we can actually go and communicate directly to the sellers and let them know, hey, once this listing expires, or if you can maneuver a way to actually accelerate the rate at which this listing is going to expire so you don't have to work with your agent on the deal and you can sell this home directly to a buyer, we will literally pick up this deal, drop down the down payment, drop down our closing costs, have the seller save anywhere from 30 to 60 grand on average on the deal, and then pass those savings back onto the buyer. This is the way to truly win in 2025. And this is what we refer to as a reverse offset method, where we basically reduce the total entry, I'm going to call it TE, the total entry into the deal, so that our net effective tax savings end up being higher than the total entry into the deal. And what this essentially does is it means the deal has funded itself just on its tax savings alone. So this is one of the most unique, superior models to buying real estate. I can't believe personally that there are still people who want to fund lenders, who want to put 20% down on homes. I don't know if it's a vanity metric thing or if it's people are just opposed to unorthodox or non-conventional approaches to doing real estate, but we have done hundreds and hundreds of transactions like this. There are hundreds of thousands of creative finance deals that happen in every real estate market across the US every single year. Now, if you are really trying to win in Airbnb in 2025, this is the whole approach that you're going to need to take. So again, just to recap, this is all the stuff that happens prior to closing, right? So we're trying to find ways to reduce the total down payment through creative financing, reduce the total closing costs, which is a product of not having lenders that we fund, if we can also reduce and remove agents and agent commissions that don't need to be paid, the seller saves a ton of money, keeps more of their money, and we can pass those savings on to the buyer with our negotiations that we bring to the seller. And then finally, we can also reduce our monthly payments, which helps us get higher cash flow. So the name of the game here is finding sellers who bought their homes in the last 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, typically approaching them and asking if they're open to creative financing, if they're open to removing the lender altogether so that we don't need to pay an agent. We can, be more flexible on the price. We can be more flexible on the terms. There's a little bit of a win that goes to the seller and a massive win that goes to the buyer with this approach. Okay, so that is pretty much everything that goes into the equation of how do you win on the down payment, closing costs, reducing fees, keeping more of your hard-earned income so that you can fund the largest possible deal that you can comfortably do with the lowest amount of money into the deal. That is what's called a reverse offset method, where the deal essentially pays for itself or is close to paying for itself because the net effective tax savings are so high and you reduce down your total entry into the deal so much that there's almost this 1-to-1 ratio. So for almost every dollar that you put in, you're getting $1 back. That's how you fund deals the right way in 2025. So now specifically, we're going to look at everything that has to do with maximizing your cash flow. Now that the deal is closed, everything that you can do to maximize the amount of revenue and also keep your monthly expenses as low as possible. So what I'm going to focus on here is I assume you're already doing a deal in one of the top 2025 cash flowing Airbnb markets in the entire US. So this is assuming that you're doing, which is typically a 5 or 6 bedroom or even larger home in these areas. You can find homes in the $500,000, $600,000 purchase price range, up to $800,000, $1 million, 1.2, 1.4, even beyond, if you're really looking at doing luxury rentals. And here I'm also going to assume that you actually got the right property type. So as I was stating, typically your 4, 5, 6 plus bedrooms are going to be the highest cash flow generating homes in that area, because in every submarket, 1, 2, 3 bedroom spots typically have the highest amount of saturation and competition, not only on Airbnb, but they're also competing with pretty much every hotel. So Airbnb's product market fit is really group travel, and then even more specifically, luxury group travel. So typically, the larger the home, and then also the nicer and more unique amenities and minimum required items that you can put in to maximize the cash flow, that is your ticket to dominating Airbnb in 2025 and beyond. So now let's speed over to the ideal designs and styling and enhancements and unique amenities that you can add in to really maximize the cash flow, just like we've done for over 300 clients. So before even diving into the very specific items and the amenities to add in, I want to give you the theory and the thesis around why this approach works. So very, very simple business model. Airbnb is literally like launching a franchise for a fast food restaurant. So if you think of McDonald's, and if you've ever seen McDonald's and why all these other fast food restaurants, if you're seeing a new McDonald's in a new area, typically over the next 6, 18, 24, 36 months, a bunch of other fast food restaurants, Whole Foods, Starbucks, you name it, start flooding into the area. Because what all these other companies have done, they've learned the competitive analysis model, which is basically stating if you know that there's already a property, or in this case, a franchise like a McDonald's, that has been the first mover, they've taken all the risk, they've been able to survive for the first 6, 12, 18, 24 months, well, then you know the company who launched that business there, or in this case, the owner who launched the Airbnb property in that specific sub-market and that specific sub-property type, you know that the deal is working. You know that the process is working. And what's crazy about this whole approach is the people who launch food franchises around McDonald's, they're able to go and procure profit and loss statements, other numbers, breaking down the income, the revenue, and all the expenses. So they know with great certainty, hey, if we're launching a similar business in this area, we can probably project to do the same or better, so long as we nail the fundamentals, which is being on the right street corner and knowing we're going to have foot traffic, knowing we're going to have demand, knowing we're going to have people who want to come into our business. It is the exact same model with Airbnb. So with this copycat model in mind, now we're going to shift over to looking at the right comps, so the right property types that we already know cash flow, and then build this little matrix where we uncover what are the enhancements, the unique amenities, the cool features and items that are in each of those Airbnbs that are cash flowing really, really well. And we're going to try and copycat that before we then hand the listing over to the proper co-hosting or management team who's going to have the easiest job in the world to keep the occupancy super high and max out the total average daily rate for the maximum amount of cash flow that you generate on the listing. And then things to keep in mind throughout this process is we want unique and superior. So the name of the game is the copycat approach. Make it the same or better so that you have an even better opportunity to outperform thy neighbor simply by putting in the bare minimum of items. And you have some Airbnbs in areas where they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on design, furnishing, elements that don't really drive revenue. Well, with this approach, what you're actually doing is maximizing the true revenue drivers in each Airbnb in each submarket just by doing a competitive analysis, which I'll do in a separate video. But today what I want to do is just fast forward you to what are the best design enhancements? What are the most unique items? What are the actual revenue drivers? Let's start with the most common ones our clients do almost every time they close on a home, and then they can slowly add things in at a later date, or you can just knock all this stuff out at once, front load all your participation, and then just let the cash flow roll in. So the first and most common item most people are going to start with are accent walls. And specifically, I'm going to point to these paint accent walls. So specifically geometric paint patterns, textured wall paint. So I've got sponge paint designs. I've got these geometric pattern designs. We even have these actually look like wooden accent walls. They're not. These are actually paint jobs. So what's really, really cool is these are definitely revenue drivers because what they do in almost every property is they make it feel like there's a more impressive experience. When you walk into a home with accent walls, with geometric paint patterns on the walls, if they are done well and designed well, the experience and the vibes, it goes through the roof. And people catch this, they immediately make a split-second decision when they're scrolling around, looking through the very first photo. When they're scrolling around, looking through the very first few photos on every single listing, making a split decision on whether or not they even open that entire listing, sit on the page, go through the rest of the photos, and then end up booking. This is going to be where you want to start with every design project. Very basic paint jobs. You can hire a general contractor or a professional painter. Typically, each room will take a few hours. You can get everything done if you're doing 3 to 6 different rooms in only 1 to 2, maybe 3 days. The next most common revenue driving item is going to be everything related to accent walls that are 3D wood panels. So what's cool about this is, yet again, the same vibes. Every single one of these design homes are examples of clients who have done these projects, and you can see they take different approaches in different areas. We have the living room here. We have a living room here as well. This is literally a bathroom. This is a living room right next to a door. There are so many different ways that you can add unique value to your rooms and build the vibes. And these are one of the most revenue driving enhancements that we've seen clients do throughout the years. I would highly recommend, if all you can do is make a 2 to 3 day visit to the property post-close, meet with a general contractor for 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday morning when you are both able to show up at the property, shake hands, show them this video, and break down, hey, I want to do paint jobs. I want to do 3D panel accent walls. Can you help me with this? Walk the property, do all the other cosmetic little enhancements like cabinets that won't open. If there are minor wear and tear items that are really, really simple to repair, think screens on windows, stucco and trim on the exterior if stuff has been degrading over time just due to natural wear and tear. All these small items, these are all the tier 1 enhancements that all but guarantee cash flow. If you just knock these out, you're probably in the 90th to 95th percentile of your little sub market of property types in the area. Almost zero doubt that you're going to cash flow just by doing these bare minimum things, which 95% of hosts do not do in most areas. And beyond that, for tier 1 items, there are so many other small unique items like you can do. For example, light fixtures, small murals, very basic items that anybody like a general contractor, a mural artist, or a designer can come in and knock out. And then you want to start shifting over to tier 2 items, things like hot tubs, which might require more than 1 to 2 days of you paying attention and being attentive because hot tubs will take a few days to ship. You need to make sure they're installed properly. Some homes actually need to redo their electrical so that they can actually support electricity going out to the hot tub depending upon the area of the home you put it in. Mini putting greens, and then things like sand volleyball pits, AstroTurf in the backyard that's not just for the putting green. There are so many other items, but again, all you need to focus on, if you look at the other homes in the area that are actually performing well, they have some combination of each of these items. And what you need to do is just focus on adding these items in. You will nail the design. It'll be super easy for your co-host to manage the property well, and cash flow will be all but guaranteed. You'll probably be in the 90th to 95th percentile of every listing in the area if you just follow each of these key steps. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Give us a like and a subscribe if you're actually getting value out of this content, because recapping, getting cash flow is actually quite easy. You just need to nail the market, the property type, and then these basic design elements that we talked about. In addition, if you can find ways to add value to your transaction by reducing the down payment, closing costs, getting rid of the middleman, it honestly is a little bit more advanced. And if you're going to try and do this on your own, it will take time. And the reality is, if you're making over $400,000 per year, your hourly rate is $200 per hour. So if it's going to take you over 60 hours to make this happen, that's $12K of your time. If it's going to take you closer to 120, that's $24,000 of your time. If your closers are like $800,000 a year and your time is worth closer to $400, well, do the math. Now you're somewhere between $24,000 to $48,000 of your time that you're deploying into this whole process to absolutely nail it. Now, if you want to take the guesswork and the legwork out of doing everything right, in terms of finding the right deal in the right market and absolutely nailing the design stuff, click the link somewhere around this video and our team will walk you through the process of how we do this 95% done for you for hundreds of clients and now hundreds of repeat clients every single year. So I hope you got value of this. Click the link around this video, schedule a call with the team, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.